Hi, I'm Autumn,
And I'm Laura,
and together we're
the
the
Boo
Boo Sisters.
Sisters.
Okay, so it is 2 weeks until Halloween, and
Ooh.
things are getting spooky. And Halloween decorations are out, and 12-foot giant skeletons are looming.
And Snoopy blow up toys.
And Hocus Pocus is on TV. My
Pumpkins are being carved.
and there's a bowl of candy in the kitchen that's almost gone from my husband and kids eating it.
So we're,
Um,
we're setting the stage. So I just got some Halloween decorations today from the dollar store. What I got was actually kind of cute though. It's like a little ghosty garland and a little pumpkin that has black sash over the top of it that you turn on a light inside.
Aw, that sounds adorable. I almost bought a ghost garland this year, and I said, I have got to stop buying ghost things.
No, I
Yeah,
veto that. You should
ghost things.
always buy ghost things.
Right.
You just said it's spooky season and everything, and I actually think that my haunting today is the scariest one I've done so far.
And today we're doing Utah stories because for those of you that don't know, we grew up in Utah. So I'm
Very
excited
true.
to hear what your story is. In researching what story I wanted to do in Utah, there's so many and it was hard for me to choose. So I'm sure there's going to be more Utah stories in my future.
Definitely. I think we might have to have one like each season.
Right. Just a Utah show in each season since that's our home base. We'll be like, and it's our Utah episode.
I want to suggest that at some point we do, maybe not in a ghost season, but there's a lot of crossover between ghosts and aliens. And I'm super intrigued about Skinwalker Ranch and all the sightings of paranormal things that go on there.
Yes, I agree. That was one that kept popping up on all of the lists that I looked at. So that would be interesting. And I also saw a story about Moon Lake. Apparently, Moon Lake in Utah has a creature like Loch Ness. I had never heard of it before. So that was also interesting.
If we did an alien crossover episode, I'm just putting this out there that me and Autumn have a mutual alien encounter experience that we can
That we,
share,
yeah, we can share it.
but not
That,
today.
yeah, just that was one of the craziest experiences in my life. So we'll just leave it at that for now.
So you better just keep tuning in because you never know when that experience is going to come up. So I wanted to start off today by talking about something that I watched. I don't know if you've ever watched it yourself, but it's Jack Osborne's Ghosts and Grit, also known as Jack Osborne's Most Haunted.
No, I haven't watched it, but he has that other paranormal show. He must be really interested into the paranormal in in doing all these kind of investigative shows.
I probably know more than I should know about his background in the paranormal because I really do like him as a host. And I think that he brings a good level, a good balance of skepticism and belief, and really wanting to get to the bare bones of history and stuff. And he is somebody who enjoys history. But his whole paranormal like career, so to speak, an interest started when he was younger and they grew up in a haunted house. Their house was actually haunted and they had experiences there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that can definitely spur an interest in trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
your past. Yeah.
So the most recent episode I watched, though, pertains to something we talked about in episode 2 that I wanted to come back to, which was the idea or the difference between a residual haunting and an intelligent haunting, and how we were also talking about that maybe there's a third type of haunting. Do you remember that combo?
Yeah, was it the sand pit?
Yes, it
The
was it
sandpit
was the
haunting.
Atreyu horse never-ending story commentary.
Okay.
The basis of this idea actually comes from Cindy Kaza, who is a medium that he had on the show. And she said that there are these three types of haunting. One is the intelligent style that we know, where a ghost or a spirit is active in the present day and recognizes that it's a different time period and they're interacting with you actively.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the residual type haunting, which is more of what we were talking about is the sand pit, someone being stuck in their motions but still present there. So it's a ghost or a spirit that's doing some of the same stuff that they did during the time period that they were alive, not realizing maybe that it's changed.
Okay.
And then there's the third type, which she called an imprint haunting or a psychic imprint, which is some experience or some episode or some event that happens and leaves a lasting impression based on an absorption from the building that they're in or the land that they're on or something else that absorbs this burst of energy and maintains that energy into the future. It's less like individuals as ghosts who don't know that the time has changed and more like you're looking at a picture.
Like an
Like,
audio
so,
recording or a
yeah,
movie or something. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so nobody's actually there, no spirits are actually there involved in it, but it still has all this energy behind it and can still play out. Battles, she say a lot of times, it leaves an imprint when there's a lot of death that's happened on land.
Right, because it's a burst of energy.
But that
Like,
doesn't necessarily mean that X, Y, and Z soldiers are there going about their business, but you
mm-hmm.
might still hear yelling and cannon fire.
Yes. Living in Virginia, I have been to Bull Run and Gettysburg and heard cannon fire in both those areas. And it is so creepy, but it's just the land that's like absorbed that energy or those noises.
Exactly.
Right. It's so interesting.
So I think the type that we were talking about being the sandpit type is actually the residual. And then this other type, the imprint type, is when there isn't a ghost connection, but it's more like the generalized events that took place that made some energy stick in that area.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that show.
Yeah, you should. And to anybody else who hasn't watched, go watch it. It's kind of like a podcast. They're sitting down at a desk talking about different hauntings and their beliefs about them and what their theories are.
So basically, they do what we do, except they're not in their pajama pants like I am.
All right. Well, I think you're going first today.
Yes, I get to go first. This is an interesting choice for me because, well, let me start with I love history, and a lot of my paranormal fascination is about the history of a place and what could cause a haunting. And as I got into the research of this location, it was a lot about the hauntings and not a lot of history as to why those hauntings might be happening. So this is very
Oh.
haunting heavy and
So,
less
you know
history.
what is interesting about that?
Yeah.
The one I chose is the same way. There's
Do you?
not like a terrible amount of history, and there's more about the hauntings.
Okay, hopefully we didn't choose the same one. I got into it and I said, okay, well, I don't know why this entity would be haunting this because there is nothing I could find in the research.
If anyone can figure it out, it's the Boo sisters.
Yeah,
Let's
we'll discuss
go.
it and see what happens. My location is Southern Utah University in Cedar City.
Dun dun dun.
So neither of us went to Southern Utah University, but I found some really fun stories about it. I'm just going to dig right in. I'm going to tell you about several ghosts, and I'm going to start with the least scary and work up to the most scary.
Oh gosh. Okay.
My first ghost story is about a ghost named Miss Little. So, according to a 1983 newspaper article, in the 1930s, a high school student by the name of Miss Little would visit the old main building on the Southern Utah University campus because she had a piano recital coming up. The old main building had a piano on the third floor, so she would come to the university to practice for that recital. Her recital song and the song she loved playing was Deep Purple. One day, the song stopped playing halfway through. When students went to investigate, the girl was discovered dead, still sitting on the piano bench.
That's spooky.
There was no autopsy report that I could find as to why.
Okay,
So,
okay, wait, hang on just a second.
yeah,
So, a girl who is a teenager just kills over on a piano bench and nobody does an autopsy?
according to the newspaper,
I mean,
super strange,
that
right?
feels a little like some funny business happening.
Right. And this has probably led to why maybe she still haunts there because if she died out of her time when she wasn't supposed to, for whatever reason we could surmise, that often leads to hauntings. So after her mysterious death, many people claimed that they still hear music coming from the third floor. And it continued after the building was rebuilt in the 1950s after a fire. And the music is still heard to this day. They hear piano keys or piano tunes, and people say that she continues practicing for a recital that will never come.
I feel bad about that.
Is phantom music not the scariest paranormal experience?
Which is why I think the music box as a tool for ghost hunting is one of the scariest things, too.
Yes, because the music box will play if something gets in front of the music box, but why do they always have to make it the scariest music box ever?
Any classical music that's slowed down or any instrument that's slightly out of tune creates this dissonance in our brain that I think just naturally makes us feel ill at ease.
Yes, we'll leave it at that comment because that's very smart. But
Okay.
I agree. It's because the music box is being out of tune or out of
Mhm.
rhythm because it's going so slow. The next haunting is Dr. John Lawrence Seymour. Dr. John Lawrence Seymour is a famous American composer and playwright. Was he one of the top Mormon composers of his day and had his music played by symphonies across the United States? He ended up retiring from composing, and for the last 16 years of his life, he served as a librarian at Southern Utah University. He passed away from old age in 1986. Many people believe he didn't want to leave the campus and the students that he cared so much about and the job that he really loved doing. Students say that he resides in his very own office in the special collections section of the SUU library. One report read, I was in special collections by myself one evening when out of the corner of my eye I saw something dark floating off the ground. It passed through the room where I was and went around the corner, fading away. It was as if I could only see the bottom half of his figure. I thought to myself, okay, it's time to go home.
I mean, I like that comment.
This ghost would be pretty cool, I think, to meet a famous composer.
Imagine you had this librarian who was a famous composer who you went up to and you were like, "Can you help me find this book?" Isn't that so weird?
I think it's fun.
And imagine you went to school for something music related and coming to the library and being able to talk to somebody who was a famous composer.
We have a music theme happening here that I never actually realized in writing this down because the first girl was playing a piano, then we have this composer. The next haunting story I'm going to talk about is still in the arts because these ghosts reside in the auditorium and the Adams Memorial Theater.
Ooh.
In my opinion, being a theater person myself and working in theater for nearly 15 years, I feel all theaters are haunted because the artisans who work in the theater love the theater so much that they want to stay there. That's just my personal experience.
I don't want to tip my hat too soon, but my haunting might be right along these same lines.
Oh, good. So theaters are haunted. The
Theaters
end.
are totes
Goodbye. This
haunted,
is the end. Right.
just like lighthouses.
And maybe when I was young and wanted to work in theater, it was the paranormal draw, like the Sixth Sense paranormal draw I had that I was like, oh yeah, I want to work in theater.
I don't know
Do, do,
about
do,
that.
do, 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 do. Rumors have circulated around campus that a man and a child, or possibly multiple children, roam the theater, especially the underground tunnels connecting the stage to the dressing rooms and the costume shop. The man is said to be wearing a top hat, which, side note, reminds me of the top hat ghost in Disney's Haunted Mansion ride that they just rose from the dead. It's really famous right now. Hashtag Disney mom. The man and the children can be caught whistling or reciting lines from plays. It is theorized that perhaps they were once actors themselves and after death returned to the stage. However, I was just thinking from our conversation earlier that this could be a good imprint haunting to hear actors rehearsing
Mm.
their lines, singing songs that they would have said on stage. It's just one of those great, theater is one of those great bursts of energy all at once. And there's just being on stage and being behind stage. I know that those nights you're just running on pure adrenaline and excitement and camaraderie,
I think it could be either imprint or residual.
but they're going about their normal day on the in
Yeah,
the
so I
theater.
think it could
Yeah.
be actual entities that passed away and are haunting the place and going about their normal play duties. I don't know, their normal play acting, whatever they did. Or it could be an imprint haunting where it's just picking up the sounds and sights and different things that went on, and it's not actually necessarily people who died and are haunting.
hmm That could be why theaters in general are so full of quote hauntings because they had so much energy behind them that they're just leaving, different recordings.
How about the energy of all of the audience? And it might not be necessarily a big audience, but think about how plays make you feel, how these stories can make you feel ultimately like triumphant or really angry or really
Or make you
sad or
cry.
like these different
Yeah,
extremes. And the whole entire audience is going through that all at once. That could
right.
definitely be an imprint into itself,
So
especially if a theater,
you have hundreds of people feeling one emotion
yeah.
all at the same time, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
good thought too. Okay, my final haunting I'm going to talk about is Virginia Loomis. And this is where it gets weird, so buckle up. Virginia is Southern Utah University's most famous resident ghost, and her story is also the most horrifying. Poor Virginia was murdered in 1898. Ironically, the same year that SUU Old Main Building, the first building on campus, was built. She was found
Weird.
in a quarry just east of Cedar City. Virginia's body was found draped over a large boulder, which was covered in her blood, as well as were the rocks around the murder scene. A little bit later that year, that same boulder was made to make the bricks that built Old Main.
Why?
So it was in a quarry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they like, how would you say it? Harvest rocks to
Sure,
make
they harvest
bricks
rocks.
to make bricks for buildings. Some of the reports I read that workers who were going into the quarry to create the bricks for Old Main were the ones who found Virginia's body. And they found her. And then they were like, oh, this is also a great boulder to make these bricks.
Okay, but wait a second. How do they 100% know that that boulder wasn't just removed because it was part of a crime scene?
I guess we can't totally verify. I will try to give you proof in a minute. But if it were true that this boulder where she violently died was used to build a building, it could very well be that the building became the prison, for this entity,
It
right?
could.
Like that your spirit is stuck there in this historic building.
Well, even if it wasn't that exact boulder
Hmm
and We just talked about how imprint haunting works. Near that boulder, there were a bunch of other rocks and things. Even if they didn't get bloodied, they would have had the imprint potentially of her death and the energy that took place there and the fear she felt or the anger, the whatever she went through.
Right.
And those rocks could have been very well used.
Right. Virginia's boyfriend, Stephen Farr, was the chief suspect for the murder, but he was never convicted. 50 years later, in 1948, Stephen Farr was ironically hired as a janitor at Southern Utah University. On his first day of work, he was lighting the coal furnace in Old Main's basement when something caused the furnace door to slam shut on his arm. He was trapped with his arm inside the furnace and was unable to get free, and horrifically, Stephen became the human torch for a fire that ended up nearly burning the entire building to the ground.
Oh, wow. He totally did it.
Right? Coincidence? I don't know.
Guilty. That's evidence enough for me. It's a closed
Like,
case. Shut the
it's like,
book.
oh. Old Main was rebuilt in the 1950s, but it is said that Virginia continues to haunt the building to this day. Here's a fun fact. One of the bricks that was stained with Virginia's blood from the boulder was retrieved from the fire and is supposedly kept in the special collections section of the library. And if you ask about the brick, the librarians will bring it out and show it to you.
Oh my gosh. I would want to try that.
Right? If we have any listeners that go to SUU, please go to the library and ask about the brick and tell us if a brick exists and if you can see blood on it because I am so interested.
And also maybe take a picture.
And then send it to us because that is an amazing story if that's true. I would just love to know.
Imagine even if we had 10 people listen that were from there and all 10 of them went the same day. And the poor librarian is like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Why do people keep asking about this brick we supposedly have when we don't have a
We
brick?
don't have
Like,
a
where
brick. I'm going to go a little further deeper into these stories. Southern Utah Paranormal Society did conduct an investigation at the old main building and in the theater. And in their findings, they did record piano music, movement in the theater rafters, a ringing bell, loud breathing, and a gruff voice saying, "Go away." The Paranormal Society says that they found no proof that Virginia still haunted the building, but rather the other hauntings that I went into are more plausible based on the evidence that they captured. While doing an investigation in the dressing room, the team saw what looked like somebody walking outside the dressing room door. The team says that SUU was overall one of the neatest and most active places they have visited. In addition to that, hundreds of students have reported strange occurrences on the third floor of Old Main, including strong gusts of wind inside the building, classroom blinds that suddenly open, close, glowing floating lights, and electrical disturbances during class.
someone wants to get out of class early.
They like rigged it. So 2 years ago in 2022, the SUU Alumni Association did a ghost tour during October for any students who wanted to participate and learn more about the campus hauntings. One of the hosts of the event, Kyle Bishop, he was chair of SUU's English department, told about his personal experiences on the campus. He told one story during the tour that I have never heard in the paranormal world. When Kyle was a young boy living in Cedar City, he was playing with his friends on campus when he said he heard creepy organ music coming from Old Main. As it became louder, he and his friends became unsettled and started to hurriedly walk off campus. But when Bishop looked back at the building, He stopped and he saw in the southeast window on the third floor an empty white flower pot on the windowsill with a crack in it. Then the pot morphed itself into a cloaked figure standing at the window. When Bishop turned back around to tell his friends, they were long gone running up the street. Kyle says, I believe I saw a ghost that day.
And the moral of the story is don't do drugs. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, but isn't that interesting? I've never heard that in the paranormal world that an object caught somebody's attention and then morphed
Morphed into
into something
something.
else. Like,
Yeah,
what is
that
that?
is
A
unusual.
changeling? Yeah. Kyle also said during this tour that even though the thought of ghosts and supernatural sightings are unnerving to some, for many people it is how they find connection, not only to the past, but with those in the present who have had similar experiences. It is a shared living experience. And I just thought that was a great way to end my story because it is a living experience. I feel like we all yearn for connection. And I think that's why we research the past and maybe in some ways, at some times, exaggerate its presence with us today. It's because we want to have that connection with our own history. We want to have a story to bond over. And that's beautiful. I think that's why the paranormal is beautiful, is because it ignites that human connection.
Well, thank you, Kyle, for those words, and you for putting them into more words.
Yeah. So what do you think? What's your ghost rating?
My boost scale rating, I would give it a 3. I would give it a 4 if I know that the brick actually exists and if I could see, because I haven't seen your evidence because I don't know about your haunting beforehand, if I could see somewhere the article of this girl's murder.
Right. So I know that the newspaper articles on Virginia's death exist because I looked them up in a newspaper database, but to get that actual article, I would have had to pay for it, and I didn't. So, but I know
That's
they
okay.
exist, but I don't have the details, and I wish that it was free to just get my hands on those newspaper articles. But I think that story is so coincidental and horrific. It just freaks me out. I would give it a 4 simply because if I went to SUU, I think there's so possibly so many hauntings and entities that it would be a lot of activity.
Or maybe if you do go to school there, maybe you have heard these stories, or maybe you have stories of your own, in which case, let us know. Leave a comment somewhere on social or contact us because I want to know if anybody has experienced something who's been there.
Yeah, I would like to also. Okay, your turn, I think.
I'm going to say right now is a little bit more spooky. So if the kids are listening, you might want to not have them listen to this haunting. It's not gruesome or anything, but in the telling, it might be a little scary.
Okay, I don't know if I'm ready. It is nighttime right now.
Well, let me ask you, are you feeling brave today, Autumn?
No, I'm gonna go to bed right after this, and I'm probably gonna lay awake for hours.
Here's what's going to happen. You should dim the lights. Everybody now, dim the lights, light your candles, get the mood going. And then I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and to imagine yourself in the scene that I'm about to give you.
You know what everyone just did was turn their lights up brighter.
You do you.
Okay, go for it. I'm closing.
Okay.
I'm closing them.
All right. So my haunting is on the Capitol Theater in Salt Lake City.
Ooh, I
Are
love
your
this.
eyes closed?
Mm-hmm.
Keep them closed. You've just become a police officer, and your first role is a protective service officer. You're put in charge of security at a county facility. It's a historic theater that is a well known landmark in your city and has been around since the early 1900s. You report in for your first day on the job, meet your partner, and start doing your rounds. There's a long basement room, almost too big to be a hallway. In the pitch black, you're shining your flashlight around. There are doors along either side and a grand piano sitting alone in the very center. An old creaking elevator takes you up to do rounds on the other three floors, including the central auditorium with its rows upon rows of original seats, completely empty and hollow, as if waiting for guests, waiting for an audience. A sensation creeps along your neck that you're being watched, but maybe it's just the security cameras. Or is it? It's creepy, but you have a job to do, and at least you have a partner backing you up. Only your partner seems a little cold. He doesn't want to talk to you or get to know you. It seems like he just wants to get the job done and get out of there. Over the next few days, you continue along the same pattern as you learn your new position. Day 3, your partner sends you on closing rounds alone. You're confident that you know what you're doing. You start at the basement, checking that every door is closed and locked, every light is turned off. You make your way slowly up. Floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, checking every little space to make sure no one was left in the building. Finally, making it to the very last room on the very last floor, the rehearsal room. You peek your head inside to take a look to the left and the right when a door slams behind you across the hall. Your first reaction is that somebody broke in. Some kid must be hiding out or playing tricks on you. You call it into your partner, who assures you that there's no one on the security cameras except for you, but he still comes to meet you, and together you draw your weapons and enter the room, which happens to be a bathroom, only to find no one inside. That's when you see that this particular door has a hydraulic hinge. It couldn't have slammed shut. Maybe it was another door. So you and your partner check the entire floor, and still you find nothing. To be certain you aren't missing someone, you proceed to check the rest of the building, starting with the next floor down, floor 2. As the door opens to floor 2, you see all of the lights have been turned on, and all of the doors are now open. You know you turned off those lights. You know you shut all the doors. Someone has to be there. But after a thorough check of the rest of the theater, you find no one. And even after reviewing the security footage together, you still find no evidence that anyone was ever there. You chalk it up to some electric surge, maybe a draft, or you spaced out and forgot to check the second floor. Something must have happened. It must have just been in your head. A couple days pass. For the first time, you're on shift alone, and you can't help but be a little on edge. As you're sitting watching the security feeds in the control room on the first floor, you start to hear a faint whispering. You leave the room, gun poised, and turn in the direction of the noise. As you travel down the hallway, the whispering gets louder, louder. Then someone coughs. It's coming from the basement. As soon as you get to the basement and flip on the light, the coughing abruptly stops. But you check to make sure every room is secure. At the end of the hallway, at the very last door, you smell smoke. At first, you try to open the door and it won't open. When finally you get it open, the room is empty and the scent of fire dissipates. Okay, you can open your eyes now, everybody.
I don't like that all the doors were open and all the lights were on. That creeps me out.
Doesn't it though? This is the story of Dave Murphy, and he was a Salt Lake County Sheriff's deputy. In 2006, this series of paranormal experiences he had are what led him to ask for a reassignment after only a few weeks on the job. And he's not the only police officer that experienced it. In addition to these things that happened to him, he also saw a shadow figure and he saw someone on the security footage in the auditorium itself sitting in one of the seats. And he swears the figure then flew up into the ceiling. But when they checked the security footage back, they couldn't find anybody on the footage. He also heard the piano playing on its own at one point.
Oh my gosh. We've watched Ghost Hunters a lot, Laura, and I feel like they've catched shadowy things like that in theaters quite
Mm-hmm.
often and then played back the footage and they saw it with their own eyes, but then the camera didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's so strange to me.
One of the things that's interesting about this story is that this particular cop, when he was reassigned, he was patrolling this area nearby a few months later when he got a call from the new cop that was in charge of this. The cop said somebody had broke in and he felt it was his duty to go and help this guy out who was at the theater and to tell this guy his own experiences and say, no, you're not going crazy. When I worked here, I had this happen too.
It's interesting to me and also horrifying that it's a policeman's job to catch bad guys and
Mm-hmm.
they're so freaked out
Right.
that they're like, nope, bye. I can handle a bad guy with guns, but I can't handle ghosts.
The Capitol Theater was featured on the show Paranormal Witness in 2012. They interviewed these police officers, and the producer said that they lended a credibility lacking in other haunting stories. That credibility, they thought, added an extra layer of fear because when you have somebody or multiple somebodies who have this credibility, this line of work, and they're kind of putting their names on the line and their jobs on the line to say these things that they can't explain happen to them, you find that that's almost evidence into itself, right? Because they're not going to lie about it or they're less likely to than other people because they have so much to lose. And you think, okay, then it must have truly happened. And that makes it scarier.
I kind of thought that with my story, with the dean of the English department telling his ghost story about the campus, just
Mm-hmm.
because it was the dean. I kind of
Right.
felt that way too. It's a person of higher authority that you just naturally listen to or take what they're saying as truth.
For sure. There was another former employee, a senior accountant, who worked on the third floor, and they had an experience that was kind of terrifying to me in 1997. So before this other one took place by 10 years. Working late one night, this guy heard the elevator outside his office ding and watched it open on his floor. He tried to ignore it and keep working until the elevator alarm sounded, and the alarm was indicating that something or someone was blocking the door and keeping it from closing.
Oh no, I don't do well with that.
He got up, went to the elevator, and couldn't see anything. So he thought, well, maybe something's blocking it from the inside. So he steps inside the elevator to see if he can figure it out.
No,
And
you don't go inside the elevator.
you're like, oh, heck no, don't do
It's
that.
like it's like one of those horror movies where you're like,
Yeah.
don't go in the elevator.
What are you, crazy? And that's when the doors closed behind him.
Of course.
Yeah. So he
Saw
turned
that
around
coming.
to see the elevator button for the basement light up.
Oh my gosh.
And while he tried to push the button to open the doors, they wouldn't open. And it took him all the way to the basement, to the bottom floor.
Oh my
And
gosh,
he
I would have
actually, you would have what?
peed my pants. For
I mean,
sure.
I'm almost positive if I was alone in that situation, I would not, under any circumstances, get out of that elevator on the bottom floor. But he wrote it down and had enough courage to poke his head outside and look around. And he called out into the darkness if anybody was there.
Oh my gosh.
So
But
that's
listen, if
brave.
the elevator is like messed up, right, and it didn't let you off any other floors, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to think that it's necessarily going to even be able to take you back up. In my head, I'd be like, great, I'm going to have to find the stairs
Yeah.
in
In
this
the
dark
complete
basement
dark.
because I'm not going to trust the elevator to get me back up.
And you know that while like we watch these ghost shows and stuff and we can always see what they're doing, at times they'll shut their camera, like their IR off and stuff to show us
How
that
dark it
how
really
dark it
is.
truly is. And so you're thinking he goes down into this basement. It's not like he has a flashlight or anything. He wasn't investigating. All he has is the light of this elevator that took him down. So imagine now And this didn't happen to him, but imagine that the light of that elevator then goes off if it
Oh
was
my
having
gosh.
electrical
Right.
problems and it left you in complete
Right.
darkness.
Did it? Did it do that?
No.
Okay. I was like, oh my gosh.
So he poked his head out and all he saw was the piano sitting there, right by the light, the shaft of light coming from the elevator. He immediately ducked back inside because he was scared, pounded on the button to go
Pushed
back to
all
his
the
floor.
buttons.
Like, get me off of here. I want to go back up. And it did close and it took him back up. And he went immediately back to his office, shut the door, sat down, and just said, no, I'm going to try to finish my work. I need to finish this still tonight. Only for a little bit later to hear a bang, bang, bang just outside his office door.
I would have left for sure.
So he looks outside his office and sees all of the drawers and these filing cabinets were open.
What?
He never worked another night shift in the theater ever again. He said he never worked after dark after that.
I think he is crazy because any normal person would have just left after the elevator incident.
Not tried to do work. I'll do this
Right,
tomorrow. There's
right,
nothing that can be worth my life.
right, exactly. Like after that happens, you should have just been like, okay, I'm out of here.
And I was thinking as I was reading about this that there must not have been the security at that time that they later had.
Oh, the policeman?
Yeah, because they would have been there, right? If it was like 9 or 10 at night, which is what time he said it was.
Interesting.
You'd
Yeah,
think
that's
they
an
would already
interesting
be there.
fact. But it makes you think,
Um,
why did they get security in the first place?
right,
Were they
exactly.
coming in and finding all the drawers open and being and saying,
Somebody
okay,
must have
we need
broken in,
security?
yeah. And then they had these cameras that were normal cameras set up during the time, like that episode that I told you in the beginning. They were just normal cameras. So the camera would see what we would see, which is the pitch blackness, which didn't help them in trying to figure out if somebody was breaking in or not. So the city actually upgraded them to night vision cameras as part of the security later on after that point because of all the supposed break-ins that were happening, and they never caught anybody. I wanted to give you just a little snippet of the backstory because some of the haunting actually plays into this, and I think it's quite interesting. So the story of this theater in a nutshell: the Capitol Theater was built in 1912 as part of the Orpheum Theater chain, and it was renovated in 1929 as a motion picture house. The only recorded death was that of a 17-year-old usher by the name of Richard Duffin, who was left behind in a theater fire in 1949. During a matinee performance, somewhere started near the boiler room in the basement, the building was set ablaze. Over 600 guests and employees managed to escape, but the official report said that he tripped somewhere in the basement and fell and died of smoke
The
inhalation.
basement.
Yeah, and died of smoke inhalation, where the guy heard coughing and smelled
Yeah,
fire.
and smelled fire.
Isn't that so scary?
Yes, but also makes kind of legitimate sense. I love when you can put things together like that. You know, in my story, they captured piano tunes, and then there was the story about Miss Little playing the piano. And,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of makes it more believable or more credible, also.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing about this supposed ghost of this usher is that he prefers to go by the nickname George as the ghost, I guess, according to people who have investigated there. And he's particularly active during performances of the Nutcracker. I guess maybe because he likes that performance or something.
Oh
It's
no,
not
the
really clear.
Nutcracker. That's like one of my very favorite theater performances.
Well, you kind of wonder, okay, so you have this 17-year-old kid, first of all, who is working at this theater as an usher. So either one of two things. I mean, he could have just been trying to make money, but then you can work just about anywhere, right? People who work there, I think, actually have a love of the theater.
Right. You know what? I think mom and I went to see the Nutcracker at Capitol Theater.
Dun dun dun.
I know I was too young back then, right? I was about 4 or 5
Hmm.
to know to watch out for anything paranormal, but I'm pretty certain that's where we went.
I mean, I would
Crazy.
definitely go. Maybe we should try to convince mom to go back and just don't tell her it's haunted.
Yeah, Mom, don't watch this. Don't watch. Mom,
Listen to this.
don't listen to this episode now that you've gotten all the way through it.
Something I found really interesting about my haunting, which I kind of wanted to talk about too. In 2018, the theater was giving some ghost tours during the month of October that I found, including giving tarot readings. Okay,
Mm.
which is a little strange for Utah. But in 2019, the theater underwent $33 million in renovations, taking out old furnishings, including things like the theater seats and the piano, and it's now under new management. And more recently, in again 2019, the Deseret News reported that Cami Monk, who is the communications manager for the Salt Lake County Arts and Culture, said, "There has been talk through the years that there is a ghost here. I have not had any experience with the ghost, and it's not something we usually highlight when we talk about Capitol Theater, but I don't think that he's with us anymore." So super sus
Wait,
because there's no ghost, but he's not here anymore.
but what if he was connected to a thing at the theater, like the piano, instead of the theater itself?
And I thought about that too and the possibility of that. But more likely, I think that he would still be there in some regard, but maybe the renovations, as opposed to stirring up the spirits, made him aware that time had moved on. And or because it seemed like more of an intelligent haunting, maybe there's more than one spirit there, one that goes by the name of George that isn't him, or somebody that's more of a pesky spirit. And that was more because the coughing thing seems very residual, but the
Mhm.
opening filing cabinets and closing and
Yeah,
opening doors seems intelligent.
right. And playing with the elevator while you're in it. Right. That's
Yeah,
intelligent for sure.
maybe he's gone because it was a residual thing, but maybe the intelligent haunting, whoever that was or whoever it is, still remains and they just don't want to talk about it. And there are a couple of reasons that that could be. When you think about any religious people, and I'm not just talking about specific to the Mormon culture, but anybody who's religious could have difficulty accepting the idea of people who die and whose spirit remains in a state of unrest. And maybe that was the case with the new management, or maybe they were just worried the ghost stories were scaring people away and they didn't want bad business.
Yeah, I think that could be a very good possibility where they didn't want the ghost angle to shine through. Ironically, I think paranormal vibes is increasing tourism to places.
Lately, yeah,
So
for
they
sure.
probably should have gone the other way with their marketing,
And just leaned into it.
right? And just leaned into the stories and been and said, now that we've done all these renovations, we're actually having more paranormal activity.
Come investigate here.
Yeah.
That does take a lot of manpower to, I think, organize even groups of people coming in and investigating somewhere, which I feel like we could talk about in a whole episode by itself, probably, is the tourism of ghost hunting and if
Right.
that's the like positives and negatives of it. But I do think that it's hard for a historic place to lean into that and not expect some flack from the
Hmm.
community or potential damages from like teams that don't respect the place. There's a lot I think that goes into that we don't think about.
Right.
Now, I ask you, sister, what would you rate it on the Boo scale? The
So
Capitol Theater.
I think that's definitely the scariest one we've done. I would give it a 4 simply because I'm reserving my fives for super horrifying stories. I think I would go there just because I'm so intrigued and it seems so active. And I personally love theaters. So I think I would go investigate any theater just because of my personal relationship with them and could maybe
Mm-hmm.
draw out some activity.
I think your rating's fair. I would also give it a 4 and I would reserve my 5. I do think if any of that happened to me, it would be a 5.
Yeah. Well, if you were there in person for sure.
Oh, yeah. I think that if any of that stuff holds water for other people that go there even now, that would be a crazy place to investigate, which they probably don't allow based on their commentary, but who knows?
Maybe someday in the future. Ghost Hunters, Project Fear, if you're listening, see if you can get in
Because we would like to see
because
that.
we would like to watch. We have 2 more episodes in this season until Halloween, so it's getting exciting, but don't be discouraged because there will be a season 2 following the holidays. We're excited to keep going. On to the next.
And hopefully you're excited too. I
Yeah.
don't know. Can we use on to the next? That's kind of taken.
It's not copyrighted. You know, what do they say? Imitation is flattery or something
The
like that.
sincerest form of flattery. Yep. Thanks for listening. And as always,
Happy
happy
hunting.
hunting.